This is Advisor 3.0, a show designed to help you as a financial advisor elevate your professional practice, transform your clients' lives, and take your business to the next level. I am Abraham Okusanya. Welcome to the show. My guest today is a leader in asset management. He was instrumental in growing Vanguard UK from a fledgling organization into the formidable force that we know in the industry. Probably the most trusted asset manager in the UK today, with the highest net promoter score in the entire industry. I'm talking about none other than Neil Cowell, who was now the head of UK distribution at Vanguard, and now a business coach and consultant. Neil, welcome to the show.
Abraham, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you on the show, Neil. So, Neil, give us a little bit of an insight into your career, how you started, and the journey that brought you here today.
Yes, I'd like to do that. Actually, my journey started about 100 yards from here in Leadenhall Street back in the early 80s. So my first role was at a Lloyd's Brokers, Jardine Glanville. So that was for a couple of years, which I thoroughly enjoyed, it being my first role. I had a brief foray into the timber business, but that didn't go terribly well.
That's interesting. Financial services.
Yeah, a brief foray. Right. And then I joined Standard Life in the early mid-80s. And spent the best part of 25 years there in various roles. And then I left Standard Life in 2011 to join Vanguard, where I spent the next best part of 13 years.
So at the point that you joined, Vanguard UK business was what, 2 years old?
About 18 months, yes. It was very small. I mean, I think I was number 45 through the door. So it was a very small business and didn't at that time have any particular strategy or plan to grow to the size it is today. So yeah, it was very much a startup in those days.
It's incredible. So what would you consider, and you spent what, 12 years?
Nearly 13 years, yeah. 13
years. So what you consider the most interesting or challenging periods of your time at Vanguard?
I think the first 2 or 3 years was all at once very challenging because we were a brand that nobody had heard of. There was a feeling we'd seen some other firms come across to the UK with a view to making a difference, and it hadn't quite worked out. So there was an element, I think, of let's see what happens. So I think that was challenging. To grow our team wasn't easy because, again, the brand wasn't particularly known. So I think there was a lot of trust that was required in those early days and sort of following that lead that we got from the senior team over from America. But yeah, that was a challenge for sure. But all at once, it was equally exciting because to be part of that startup, and it did have lots of the attributes of a startup. Notwithstanding the fact that there was a very strong US parent involved. As far as the UK was concerned, it was very much a business on its own. So that was real fun, as was the contrarian message. And I say contrarian, but it wasn't a message that the UK marketplace had heard. Indexing wasn't particularly strong in the UK at that time. I think only about 6 or 7% of assets were indexed. So yeah, there was a contrarian message. There was an element of disruption, but a huge amount of fun as we were initially traveling the length and breadth of the UK to spread the word, as it were.
And in 15 years of Vanguard coming to the UK and 13 of you being there, it's now accepted. Indexing is now essentially accepted as a formidable investment strategy. I don't know the exact percentage of asset now. I think it's about a quarter of assets.
I think you're absolutely right. It's around about 25% now. Yeah,
incredible. It's incredible. Okay, so how did your role and indeed the company Vanguard UK change in your time there?
Yeah, I mean that speaks to what I said earlier on in terms of didn't really have any vision of a 1,000-strong business at that time. So when I came to Vanguard, it was a UK-centric role for sure, because we didn't really have a presence in Europe. We had a small business there, but nothing too large. So it was a UK-centric role, and it was focused pretty much on the retail market. And that described it, I think, as we grew our business footprint, grew our brand and our presence over the next sort of 3 or 4 years. But over time, that evolved. I mean, the business grew, we grew, and as our European business gained momentum, which is now, it's a significant part now. The spread is about a third in terms of assets between our North European business, Southern European, and the UK. So as that emerged and as that started to grow, we transitioned from what was essentially a UK business into a pan-European business, which was very exciting because there were lots of reciprocal learns to be had. I mean, in our Southern European business, it's not exclusively, but mainly a wholesale audience. So we were, able to support and help from a more retail sense, and vice versa. So, yeah, I think the role changed in the sense that it became a lot bigger. It was including wholesale and retail. And of course, as I say, it was now part of a European focus rather than just a UK-centric business.
So Vanguard was originally, as we know, a US business, and you were part of getting off the ground in the UK. And as we know, the Americans do things very differently than Brits. So were there any cultural shocks, things that your American colleagues felt that was the way to do things, and perhaps you thought maybe not?
Apart from having to get used to saying reach out a lot, which was a bit of a culture shock, I have to say that I felt it was just completely elegant. The senior team that came over from the US were, I think, humble, certainly very patient, and most important of all, I think, aware of the fact that it was a different market. So yeah, we had the benefits of the US strength and the US thought leadership and that established business base over there, and we benefited from that hugely, but never I felt was that imposed, and never did that ever present as a shock. It was very, very, as I say, very elegantly done. So yeah, the language was different, but the actual modus operandi was fantastic. Really was.
So you spent, more than 2 decades of your career at Standard Life or in the traditional, product world. Can you compare and contrast that time with your experience at Vanguard?
I think a minor difference was that I moved to Vanguard into a pure asset management role. Right. So that was terrific for personal development purposes. And I love that, versus that more product side that I'd been on previously. But I think probably more important than that was the difference for me at Standard Life. I worked there for circa 25 years, and 20 years of that was as a mutual, and 5 years post the flotation was as a PLC. And there is a difference. There is a difference in approach, a difference in focus, potentially a difference in purpose, actually. And that's quite tangible. So it was really terrific to evolve to Vanguard in 2011, where not only was there such a strong sense of why, such a clear purpose, and it was just so tangible. It permeated through every single aspect of the business, whether that was marketing, finance, sales, our investment management group. There was just a clear understanding about why we were there, what we were trying to do. So for me, I think that drives culture. That if you have a clear reason why and a clear purpose, I think people gravitate to that. And that certainly described the way it was at Vanguard, and stayed that way. As I say, I joined when it was a fairly small business in the UK, but we never lost that sense of purpose, and that drove, I think, a very, very strong culture.
Do you think Standard Life and indeed the wider asset management sector has lost that sort of focus on and the purpose, what they're trying to accomplish?
I see lots of evidence of firms trying to gain that ground now. I think a few years ago, that was a very valid question that you pose. A lot of providers, asset managers or traditional insurers were thinking, well, what is our purpose beyond asset gathering? You know, and of course, as we've seen, the value chain change and margins being compressed, you know, that became quite an uncomfortable space just in that pure manufacturing arena. So I think out of necessity, a lot of firms now are thinking through what's our mission, what's our vision, what's our purpose. And so that change is happening, but it's not easy to do. You know, it's an awful lot easier to do if you have that singularity through your structure of being a mutual, because there's no doubt why you exist.
So you ran a very successful sales team. And, you know, how would you say that the role of the BDM has changed, you know, in your time? And what do you think advisors are really looking for in their BDM?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In my experience, the BDM role has really changed in alignment with the way that the advisor sales process and role has changed. I mean, when I first started at Standard Life, perhaps, you know, the approach at that time through advisors was, you know, I'll get the best product for you, because it was a product arena. There's no doubt about that. That evolved, I think, in the 90s into 2000s with the advent of fund supermarkets. And that changed from I'll get the best product for you to I'll get the best funds for you. And I think now over the last 10 or 15 years, the advisors, you know, certainly those that we interacted with a lot at Vanguard have evolved into that, I'll be your financial coach. Now there's a lot of work to do there, but that evolution has is taking place. So I think the best BDMs that I see are ahead of that. And rather than just now being product sales, I think we're seeing BDMs evolve into practice management consultants, into behavioral coach skills, and not just orchestrating it so that they can bring experts in, but getting their own game up such that they can deliver some of these sessions themselves. So it's a lot more consultative, it's a lot more around practice management, it's a lot more around behavioral finance and that type of thing, versus that more traditional buy our product, not that one.
I find that particular point about how the role of BDMs, you know, has changed really fascinating, because I was thinking, certainly we see signs of this in our own business. In the early days, I thought, who needs, you know, a BDM, right? You know, advisors don't want to be sold a product or talk to or about funds. Who needs a BDM? I was quite surprised massively by how much advisors want to have a BDM to talk to them, as you said, not about product, not about funds, but about the business, about technology, you know, bringing resources and insights, and to have a point of contact that they can actually go to, you know, if they need help, because as you know, a BDM might be responsible for, I don't know, you know, 50, 100 different firms. They see all sorts, you know, whereas the advisors just in their own practice. So they bring in, you know, tons and tons of insights. And this is something that Vanguard did extremely well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's important, I think, to understand that evolution. Advisors do want more now. And it's funny because when we see the surveys, which are done quite regularly, very high up there all the time is basic stuff, you know, rings me back and stuff like that. But it's a lot deeper than that. I mean, those are table stakes. It's a lot deeper than that. And really, you know, it might well be a utopian vision, but the ambition for a quality BDM should be as that outsourced business consultant, really, you know, someone that would be consulted should they be thinking of making a significant move. Now, that's not easy to achieve, but there are steps along the way from that. And the very first step on the ladder is you're just a commodity. And certainly we've seen movement from that, you know, towards that more partnership-based relationship. So yeah, it's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think, to your question, I think we've seen the better BDMs well ahead of that, and are just developing different skill sets, which is terrific to see.
So you run sales teams, you run distribution, you in your 30 plus years career, you would have seen all sorts of incentives,
Yep.
Incentive structure. This is a big thing in asset management.
Yep.
What are the, shall we say, less than ideal incentive structures that you've seen, and cultures generally in asset management?
I think I'm going to be positive about this. I think we have seen an evolution away from product and volume related incentive schemes. Now, the regulator has definitely had a part to play in that, concerned, and rightly so, about such things as mis-selling and treating customers fairly, etc. So I think there's been regulatory input as a potential catalyst there. But I think the asset managers themselves have been a catalyst here for change as well. We've touched on this point already about moving from just pure asset gathering into a more wealth management shape. I think asset managers are now thinking, well, what is our purpose beyond just gathering assets? How can we develop more sustainable, deeper, more meaningful, and more financially attractive relationships? And I think with that, I've seen across the last 4 or 5 years the advent of a more balanced approach to incentivization. Of course, sales volumes are still important, because at the end of the day, it's an engine room. That's what generates income. But alone, it's not enough. We are seeing now, so at Vanguard, for example, we had a balanced scorecard approach to sales incentivization, which in an equally weighted way attached value, yes, to income, but certainly to strengthen relationships, certainly to the extent to which BDMs were managing their territory well, certainly to the extent that they were performing, at a good level internally as an ambassador and externally. So lots of things that were in that scorecard spoke to a rounded performance versus one that was just focused in isolation on production. So I think there have been some catalysts for that change. Like I say, regulatory for sure, but I think asset managers themselves have had to change with that. And of course, the other thing that in any incentivization scheme, it's sort of understood within what I've just said, but worth calling out, the best incentive schemes reward people because of what they do, not in spite of what they do. And I think the challenge with that more, volume-related approach was that many times remuneration would happen in spite of people rather than because of them.
Yeah.
And now I think every single year that same rounded performance needs to be in evidence across a balanced scorecard. So there's movement there, and it's positive movement for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the production's easy to measure. You can see the inflow of assets, and quantify them. The other behaviors, such as being it's an ambassador for the brand, whether or not they manage their territory or their region. How do you measure those stuff in a way that is objective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the onus falls squarely on the sales leadership there to do just that, because it's not easy. I mean, the whole nature of it is you move from a remuneration basis that's hardwired, X equals Y, into one that's discretionary. But it's quite interesting, certainly in our experience, at Vanguard, that we still see the opportunity for quality performance, for outperformance. We still see people striving across that balanced scorecard, to be at the very top. And yes, there's a question around, can you be absolutely objective about it? Can you measure absolutely everything? But my response to that is, that really is what leaders are paid for. A large part of what a leader should be doing is using their judgment. Yes, there has to be some support for that. But I feel that as we certainly at Vanguard introduced that, not only did it feel that we were able to recognize our performance in the way we wanted, but it also encouraged people to strive for that outperformance across a broader spectrum of things.
Asset management as an industry faces some challenges going forward. How do you think it needs to change to be fit for purpose going forward?
To the point we discussed earlier, I think that pure asset gathering as a model is starting to have limitations. I think we're seeing basic P&L being challenged. Fee compression in that manufacturing space is clear. So I think we're seeing managers move from that pure asset gathering position into more wealth management provision across the whole value chain. So there are several examples of that where, and I think we'll see that continue. I think that's, what does that look like? That looks like managers who in time I think will serve both an intermediated audience and a D2C audience simultaneously on the same platform.
Interesting.
I think that has to be, rather than two different suites of technology, one platform, irrespective of, what channel it is, as I say, B2B or D2C, that feels a given to me. And if you think about that, why wouldn't you as an asset manager want to evolve into that? I mean, not only are you benefiting from far greater control, therefore, of the client journey, but you're also potentially benefiting from better economics because there's margin across the chain rather than just in one singular space. So I think some of it is out of necessity, but I do think we'll see, in answer to your question, more of a movement away from just pure manufacturing into wealth management provision to both a B2B and a D2C audience. And I think in time it will almost be the norm for that to be provided on an in-house platform.
So we see some of this happening already, some perhaps less successful than you might have thought, with the likes of M&G buying a platform and then deciding perhaps to sell it. You've seen Aberdeen, acquiring a direct consumer proposition. And I know you don't speak for Vanguard anymore, but is this a glimpse of what to come? Vanguard obviously has a direct consumer platform and a successful distribution business to advisors. Is this a glimpse of what we might expect from Vanguard going forward?
I think it's a natural evolution. I mean, what will be, but it feels a natural evolution. I mean, when we launched our D2C business at Vanguard a good few years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago, I think the most regularly asked question from advisors to us was, can we access it too?
Right.
Can we use it for certain client types as we want to grow maybe junior ISAs, incubation purposes or whatever it may be. So I think there's appetite for it. And as I say, for me, the finished article will be one technology suite, one platform. When I say proprietary, I don't mean that it's been built in-house, but owned in-house, serving simultaneously that B2B and D2C audience. I think that's an absolute given.
That's fascinating stuff. No, you'll be really interesting to see how that shapes up. What has your career taught you about how to get the best out of people?
That's a good question. I think
I've been known to ask it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think where you see people at their best, you see people that are engaged. And it actually is an area that fascinates me because companies, not just in financial services across the board, spend small fortunes with Culture Amp or Gallup or whatever it is, measuring engagement. And it's such a clear equation. Where you see strong leadership, you see high engagement, and where you see high engagement, you see great results. The relationship is crystal clear. And I think the thing that there's more work needed here is for all of the effort put into measuring and gathering that data from crew, as we called them at Vanguard, or staff, crew. I think there's more work can be done, to think about, well, what creates engagement? Leadership creates engagement. And I think we're starting to see It's interesting. I mean, when you look, and this was across Standard Life, we used to call it Q12 at Standard Life, 12 questions that gave you the outline of someone's feeling around their environment, their boss, how they were, the whole piece. Culture AMP is what I think Vanguard currently use, and there's an awful lot of quality input there from employees, and they're asking for a very, very similar set of stuff, from their leadership, from their bosses, give us a clear direction, show us that you value and recognize us, show us that we matter. It's so clear that linked to outstanding leadership, you get this engagement, and to your point, engagement drives results. So I do think that there's more can be done to think around that relationship. Results happen, when people are engaged in anything they do, they will outperform. And I think that first part of the equation, leadership equals engagement, that is, I think, where more work could be done.
You've now started a third iteration of your career as a consultant. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
I've been in various leadership roles across 25 years, I guess. And 4 or 5 years ago, I just felt I wanted to develop myself a bit more. And I've always been fascinated by coaching, probably because I think you often hear about coaching, but I don't think you often see it. It's an oft-used word, isn't it? Football coach, rugby coach, this coach, the other coach. But I was fascinated to develop myself as best I could in that arena. So Vanguard very kindly sponsored me to go off part-time, obviously, to Henley to do an executive coaching piece. And that was such a terrific 18 months across time. It wasn't, as I say, flat out for 18 months, but it was such a terrific involvement to work with professional coaches who coaching across, what outstanding qualities, it was just mind-blowing. So I wanted to do that. I achieved that accreditation. And coaching is just another, it's just an addition to that spectrum of elements that you would want to bring as a leader. You can't and don't coach all the time, sure, for obvious reasons. But so I achieved that. When I got back to the business, I carried on with. There is an international body called the International Coaching Federation, and much of the work that I had done at Henley overlapped with the requirements for the ICF. So I carried on and did that about a year ago. And I was very fortunate in the sense that Vanguard gave me the opportunity to coach internally alongside my day job over the last 2 years. And that was good because by definition, it takes you out of us. Coaching has got nothing whatsoever to do with a coach having subject matter expertise. In fact, in some respects, it's a detractor. So it was great for me to coach people in our legal team, in our finance teams, in the investment management teams. So yeah, I was drawn to it for those reasons and just wanted to develop myself as much as anything else. And I did, if I'm honest, see myself carrying on post-Vanguard, utilizing that. And so there was a one eye to the future as well, for sure.
So let's talk about some of these tools that you use in the coaching process. Talk a little bit about that.
One of the tools I use a lot, have used a lot, is a tool, Clifton Strengths is the name actually. It used to be called Strength Finder. And Clifton Strengths actually has now been bought by Gallup. It's owned but kept the brand. And it's really very different to so many other personal development frameworks that you see. Many other personal development frameworks would focus on areas that need to be addressed, focus on areas that could be improved, and set in place a specific development plan towards that, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, fine. But Clifton Strengths comes from the very opposite perspective, which is we want to work on the natural gifts that you already have, those innate strengths, that strength set. And by through the process, around 4 themes actually, which is influencing skills, strategic thinking, there's collaboration. There are several points that, form your profile, all of which are based on innate strengths. So the difference in approach is marked in the sense that people, rather than feeling slightly on the back foot with discussing what they're not good at, are far more engaged with getting involved in a piece of work towards how can I utilize this strength set? How can I make an even bigger difference in the business? How can I get, and of course you then evolve it into, well, someone with your strength profile would be, would interact extremely positively with someone of that profile. You may have to watch certain things around that, but so it's really quite scientific. But what it does, that in itself is just the basis for a coaching involvement. That just gives you real quality. That's what we're dealing with. What do you want to work on? And so I love Clifton Strengths for that reason. Because as I say, it starts with the premise that why don't we work on what you're good at and make it even better?
To work on your strength. They say it's a common thing. Work on your weaknesses, but actually work on your strength.
I mean, the program does. The profile that's produced for you does obviously have what could be potential derailers for you, because you're given basically a series of scenarios. Does this or that best describe you? And you're given 20 seconds to answer. So there's no trick in it. There's no game in it. It's uncannily accurate. But it does give you derailers because by definition, you should be aware of those derailers. But the emphasis and the effort that you put in there after is not around that development. Yes, be aware, but it's...
And is it the one, I remember doing this, the Strength Finder, I think it was called a couple of years ago. Is it the one where after that you're given some sort of animal, it characterizes you as is that the one I'm talking about? No?
That may have happened to you, yeah.
Well, I think you called it an eagle or an lion or something. No, I'm just talking nonsense.
No.
I am.
I don't remember that bit. But you may well be right, actually. You may well be right. But yeah, so Clifton Strength Finder definitely for that. That's more for one-to-one work because I just find it so powerful. But when working with, which I've done a lot of over the last 2 years, when working with leaders or small leadership teams, either or really, the other tool that I love is the Coos-Posner framework for leadership. I've used that across Standard Life and Vanguard 20 plus years. And it's such a powerful framework because every element of it is learnable and developable, but it's also based on experience versus academia. So the essence of Coos-Posner was to simply gather 16,000 inputs from people working in highly performing teams and simply ask them, what is it you think your leader is doing that's enhancing this team's performance? And across all of those inputs, just 5 themes come out time and time again. Our leader sets a clear direction. We're never in any doubt what this team's about, where we're going, or what my role in it is. That's a really important point. Though. I feel valued and recognized. Very, very important. My leader spends time with me, coaching, enabling, challenging. They role model their values. I think that should be a given, but that came out loud and clear. And the other one I think this would resonate strongly with yourself is, and it's a hard one to think through actually, our leader is inspirational. And they don't mean by that they're born with the gift of the gab and up on the soapbox they go and all the rest of it. What they mean by that is that their leader talks authentically but positively about the environment, their role in it, their mission in it. So just time and time again, these 5 themes emerged across geographies, across different industries. That's what you see from outstanding leaders. And it's just such a good reference point to just check in. I mean, once or twice a year, you check in and think, oh, I'm woeful at that. I've not even thought about that. But you can check in. And every one of those 5 elements, as I've said, is highly learnable and highly developable. And that's back to the engagement point. Where you see that strength in leadership, you'll see engagement. Clifton Strengths and Coos-Posner, I think, are 2 that I've worked closely with and have loved.
Yeah, I can certainly think of a couple on those 5 things that I need to work on. Because I am focused on going 100 miles an hour and all that. I can lose the focus and the the idea of spending time with people, checking with people, recognizing them that they're doing a good job. I mean, this morning on the train, I thought of one of our team members, and I thought, he's been doing such a fantastic job. I haven't said anything.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Why don't I just send him a text?
Yeah, fair play.
I see you.
I see you. Yeah.
I see what you're doing. So anyway, we can all work on these things, and they make such a big difference. Look, it's been incredibly useful and inspiring talking to you and learning from your journey so far. And so thank you for your time and your wisdom and all of that. I want to go, before I let you go, I want to go a little bit more personal.
Yeah, of course.
30 years experience in the
of course.
asset management industry, 30 plus. Can I just ask, Neil, how do you invest your own money?
How do I invest my money? Through an advisor, through a financial advisor. LifeStrat does figure in it. I'll have to. It does figure in it.
Yeah.
No, I have. I've worked with a financial advisor for probably 10 years now. It's interesting, isn't it? If you think about, what do they say, that there are 3 elements to any task: having time, willingness, and ability. And for me, I'd like to think, we often have debates in my kitchen about the ability part with my financial advisor, but the time and the willingness, it's just that emotional circuit breaker. It's just that advisors alpha stuff that Vanguard talks about a lot, which is because they're not me. So yeah, I do absolutely see the wisdom in having a financial advisor, for sure, and have a very good relationship there. So yes, I have a portfolio of investments through a wrap through my financial advisor, which is becoming an awful lot more interesting to me now than it was a year ago. So yeah, that's how I invest, steadily, but I'm very pleased with the way things have developed there.
So are you dialed up on equities or bonds? Are you?
I just get the asset allocation right and let time do the heavy lifting.
So tell me, what do you do with your time outside of work, Neil?
I'm very keen on cycling. We live down in about 10 miles south of Bristol, so we're quite near the Mendips. So I cycle a lot. CrossFit, I do CrossFit twice a week, which is good. They're trying, Abraham, to get me into a bowls club, but I'm not. But I'm just not sure I'm ready for that yet. Another 4 or 5 years maybe. But yeah, and it's quite interesting though, the transitional period, when you're establishing, working on your next chapter. There's a lot more time obviously that you have, and so keeping well out of the way in the house. Not interfering too much. Not interfering too much in the status quo, I've learned, is a good thing to do. So it's all going fine, and I'm loving it. It's a great time to have a little bit more time on your hands as the summer comes. So all going well so far.
And you've had an incredible career. You're going to be working with clients on a coaching basis. But is there any, from the emotional side of things, where you are now no longer the big cheese, an executive, at Vanguard? So how does it feel finally being Neil, the coach, the consultant?
As I evolved 6 weeks ago from Vanguard, we had a few little leaving do's, and it was really thought-provoking for me, actually, because the team put together a lovely montage for me, which was a beautiful thing to do in terms of looking back over the last 12 plus years, and it just reaffirmed for me really the thing that I have, whether it be at Standard Life or at Vanguard, but particularly the last 12, 13 years at Vanguard, it reaffirmed for me, out of all of the excitements of the job, and there are many, the one thing that I've always got the most out of is working with small groups or one-to-one. And the subject matter is asset management, it's whatever it is, it's that personal thing. And that was so nice to see that coming through in that little montage. So that gave me a little boost actually, because it reaffirmed my sort of, yeah, I am going to do this. I want to coach, and it's where I get a huge amount of pleasure. So hopefully that will develop now over the coming months, and we shall see. But yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Neil Cowell, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for the difference you've made in
Thank you, Abraham. Thank you very much indeed. It was a pleasure, and I really appreciate being asked to come along.
That's a wrap on today's show. Massive thanks to my production crew, especially Jake Osha, Melissa Canham, and the entire team. And of course, to our sponsor, Timeline, the market-leading provider of integrated planning technology and model portfolio service to advisors. I do hope you've enjoyed today's show. Head over to Apple Podcast and give us your review there. Until next time, goodbye.